401k advisors want to build a scalable practice, but aren't always sure what to do next. Welcome to Outcomes, the podcast designed to help advisors think, make decisions, and cast a vision to create a business for the future. Here's your host, Ross Marino, financial planner, author, speaker, and CEO of Advisor2X.
Welcome to Outcomes, the podcast. Today, I am joined by Berta Aldrich, author of Winning the Talent Shift. Hello, Berta.
Hi, Russ. How are you? It's such a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Really excited to have you on the podcast today. I was fortunate enough to hear about your book a few months ago called Winning the Talent Shift. Was able to get a copy because I was on your newsletter list. And what I love about the book isn't just the lifetime of experience and research that was poured into it, but knowing you and knowing that you really are one of us. It comes from a perspective of within our industry. So as an introduction, can you tell people what you've done in the industry so we understand your view?
Oh, absolutely happy to. I'm one of the fortunate ones, right? To work in an industry that helps people every single day. And, I think from a young age, I grew up in a small town in the Midwest, and you either could become a lawyer, a doctor, or a banker. And I didn't have the stomach to be a doctor, and I didn't have the stomach to be a lawyer, no offense. So I ended up gravitating towards money and, have had such an incredible career in this sector. I started off in group insurance underwriting. So anybody that knows that job knows it's the toughest job I think that you can have. And did that for about 5 years. Also analyzed financial statements for alternative funding arrangements. So use that finance background. My goal was always to work helping people manage their money. And probably about 6 years into my career, I got this incredible opportunity to move over to the pension side of the house, where I was able to create investment education programs for 2.3 million plan participants. So not the one-on-one that your audience does, certainly could never go that deep, but again, it was this passion position of helping individuals in 401k plans save and invest and manage their money so that they could be prepared for retirement. And that was really the start then of me kind of moving over to the marketing side. I then went to Vanguard and was marketing executive over their institutional 401k business, a global marketing operations department, and then landed my final rotation at Vanguard was in the advisor business line, where they had 1 trillion of assets under management at the time. That led to a position as a CMO in the alternative space, and then ultimately landed at one of the largest RIAs in our business as CMO and CHRO. So this incredible breadth. I think I've taken opportunities in every single discipline within our industry and have loved every single minute of it.
It's a great history, and it certainly gives you a wonderful perspective and insight into our industry because you've seen so many different aspects. And it's not just that you've been client facing, but you've been advisor facing. You're a C-suite person. You've been on boards. So that type of experience really gives you a wonderful view that your average person just can't understand. So I love that about what you've done and how it added so much value and insight to the book. But I know that your story goes back farther, and it actually involves your daughter. And it's part of your why and why you wrote the book. So can you share that story?
Absolutely. So at one point in my career, like most, there was an unexpected transition out of the workplace. My C-suite role was eliminated. And I took, the 1-year non-compete. Well, then that introduced me into Lauren's senior year of high school. And Mike and I spoke about it. And although it's tough to kind of take yourself out of the workplace, we decided that I would stay home for an additional year and be home with Lauren during her senior year, applying for colleges, all of that. But I continued to stay very involved in our industry, in FCS and helping marketers. And I did a lot of mentoring, both of men and women in the workplace. And I just happened to hang up the phone where I was mentoring this high performing male through a gaslighting situation where there was someone up here in a different part of his very large organization, financial services, that was really, it was textbook gaslighting. And so we had talked through that. I hung up the phone. Lauren walked in from practice. She was on an athletic team and told me about this girl who was being bullied at her school. And she had stuck up for her against the bullies. And all of a sudden it hit me, what is life going to be like for her? This anti-bully generation where they have the opportunity and the backing to stand up against these bullies. What's going to happen when she gets into the workplace and she encounters what my male counterpart was just encountering? And the gaslighting, he didn't have any protection. He had went to HR. There was no support there.
Can you define gaslighting?
Absolutely. So that is the sinister activity of attempting to coerce or change someone else's mind, typically a person of power, about a particular person who mostly is a threat to the individual, or the individual has something that the other individual wants and they want to take it from them. So they spread lies, deceit, they change the perception of the individual to benefit them.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
It happens. It happens in our industry, it happens in a lot of different industries. So that's really where I came up with the idea of writing this book that I would give to her at college graduation. And it would tell her everything that she needed to know about navigating the workplace. And it would tell her the things about gaslighting and targeting and bullying. And I finished the book and I started telling other people about it. And they're like, you have something here. So I started researching it. I have a master's actually in strategy and statistics. And so I started researching. And what I found ended up changing the trajectory of the book, of not only helping Lauren, but helping men and women and high performers in our industry and beyond. And the book was eventually picked up by Mr. Vogel's publisher, Wiley Publishing, and fast-tracked and came out last fall.
What a journey. The writing of a book, as I've just completed one myself, I was told it's a passion project and you will put more time into it than you could possibly imagine. And that was all true. So everybody who said that was true. And your book is years and years in the making, but it isn't just your experience. And this is what I need my daughter to know. You brought up research, a lot of research. It's not just your opinion. So can you share some of the research that maybe surprised you or really confirmed something where you just knew this was an issue and now you have proof of it?
Yeah, I think from an individual standpoint, you always know something's remiss in the workplace, but you could never really put your finger on it. So once I started digging in and really looking at what was happening, and you'll see if you look at any of my notes, my end notes in the book, it's from a variety of different resources. It's not just from leanin.org or a woman type research body of research. I spanned the globe, and what I found that I think was most alarming was the extent of bullying, targeting, and abuse in the workplace today. And of course, my original hypothesis was it happens to women, and that's not the case. Actually, the number one targeted group in the workplace are high performers. 100% of the time, high performers are targeted in the workplace. And by that, I mean, they're being gaslighted, they're being taken off their upward trajectory. And these individuals, when I say high performers, so let me define that just for a minute. So these are individuals who have strong character, have ethics and integrity, are the very people that you want to be your Sunday school teacher and you want to, to be a teacher of your children. I mean, that they have that breadth of internal compass. They have an internal compass. Number two, they're great learners. They're constantly learning and evolving. They're learning new things. They're applying it. And then number three, they're great leaders of people, whether they have a title or not. So they're collaborative. They like to see other people be successful. They look for the right answer. They don't really care to be right. They don't take the credit. They give the credit to others. So these people, what I found, can outperform an average employee 2 to 5 times. So in our business, if you think about them as an ROI, 200 to 500%. But these are the individuals who are being targeted and taken off their upward trajectory. So that was number one. Number two, women. 75% of women who have a career will encounter targeting, bullying, and abuse in the workplace. 75%. 70% of those who bring that to HR or to someone in a position of power, 70% of them will be retaliated against. And so when I started putting all of this together, it wasn't just women. 35% of men actually are targeted, bullied, and abused in the workplace. So when you started to put this picture together, you now know why we haven't made much progress in diversity in the workplace.
I had a bullying experience almost 30 years ago, and it never dawned on me that that's exactly what it was, because I didn't think much about it. I was a high performer. It was one of my first jobs in this industry, and I rose the ranks pretty quickly, let's say. So I was approaching on, within the first year, the top 10 producers in this firm. When I would come in the morning, my phone lines were cut. And I had to buy multiple phone lines and would keep them in my car. And my wife and I used to laugh about it, that I have to replace my phone line today. So my lines used to get cut, and wasn't sure who did it, but there were rewards. There was compensation for where you were ranked and so forth. And that used to go on. And eventually I would just go into my car, come in, replace the phone cord, and then just go right back to work and wouldn't say a thing. And it stopped. So I'm sure I'm not alone where there's a lot of people that have experienced it in one way or another, and they may not be aware of it. But the fact that when you bring it up, now there's also retaliation, that makes my chest tighten up as a business owner, right? I mean, it makes you want, I stutter, because how could you possibly retaliate against that? So the system has issues. People are afraid to bring it up. Is there a corporate culture or maybe a legal environment that you think really gets in the way of this playing out, or it's actually going to be addressed?
You know what, you just hit the nail on the head. So I always say the reason that this continues to happen is because we allow it. The boards allow it in our organizations, the C-suite allows it, and HR allows it. And you'll see in my book, I'm a C-suite. I was a C-suite executive and head of HR. And I always say it's ours to own. If we want to make change happen, you have to, as a leader, step up, set the bar higher, and not tolerate this kind of behavior. And unfortunately, most organizations do today. They don't know how to change it. And so, what I found was, at the very highest levels of the organization, what happened in 2020 with George Floyd and some other things that happened really changed our perspective on diversity and inclusion in the workplace. It really did. It brought a heightened sense to the fact that we hadn't made much progress in 30 years. And so the good news is we have attention on it. Unfortunately, the more diversity that we bring to the workplace, the worse it's going to get, because our organizations are not prepared. They're not prepared. And so I talk a lot in the book about acute situations where if you see something happening in your workplace, here's a professional way to address it. If you're the individual being targeted, if you're a leader who's sitting in a room, don't be accomplice to that kind of behavior. And then number 3, what you can do as an organization to create this infrastructure that creates high performance, diverse organizations instead of kind of these low performing, sharp elbows, cutting your phone lines to get ahead type organizations.
I would imagine most leaders would say they value diversity. They want diversity. They want high performing teams. Our industry understands diversification, right? It's a principle we have in our industry. So we get it. But yet you talked about high achievers versus high performers. And you talked about a culture that's different, what that means. And I'd like you to explain what you mean by a high achiever in that environment and a high performer, and then maybe contrast the two, because I'll bet a lot of people get them confused. I know I probably get them confused, but there's a difference between high achieving, high producing, and then high performing as a team. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely, happy to. And I think you just set up the story beautifully. So the high achiever in your story is the person who cut the phone lines. And let's assume that that person was also maybe getting what they wanted, right? Let's say that they were dialing the phones and they were doing a good job at that. But they thought if they suppressed you, they could even do better. A high achiever leaves dead bodies along the road. That's the difference. They have sharp elbows. They are willing to do cutthroat activity. They're willing to target and gaslight and use all of these tactics I talk about in the book in order to suppress the actual high performer. The high performer, in contrast, is the individual who is equally driven, but the way in which they perform is very different. It's much higher level, right? They're professional. They do it as a team. They are team builders. They want to see other people be successful. They have a much more strategic and broad view of not only the goals that they need to achieve, but how they can achieve it across the organization. It's not just about them. Of course, they're driven and they want to outperform everyone else, but they're not driven by being cutthroat. They're driven by being better every single day.
Sounds like a comparison between me versus we, where the high achievers are just looking at their world and the high performers are thinking we and how do we elevate everybody and succeed.
Perfectly said. Yes.
So I think over the last year or two, we've seen a change in a lot of people. And I've gone through it myself where our eyes have been open to a lot of what's been going on. I think many years ago, we would hear some of these stories and it's simple to say, oh, come on, that person has a victim mentality. Give me a break, right? They're a whiner. They're always looking for a reason. They're not successful. I could come up with plenty of one-liners and cliches that would be really offensive to a lot of people. Some of them would be true and other ones would be completely inaccurate. Sure. So we have this challenge where we hear something and at first we may think it's just somebody pointing out something that really isn't an issue. It's more of a victim mentality or what the brain believes the eye see, that confirmation bias that this is here and this is going on. But I know I've certainly gone from a place of ignorance where I just didn't know. And then now you have to figure out, once you know and start to learn, I have to do something about it. Because if I don't, I go from ignorance to indifference. And to me, that's the accountability place. When I'm indifferent, I've now made a choice, a conscious choice to say, I'm not going to do anything about this within my organization or within my life. But I don't think I can make that choice till I pass from ignorance and all of a sudden I understand. So for someone who maybe struggles with, is this being overblown? This is just part of life. It's people, it's men, it's women, it's successful people, it's underachievers and overachievers. And come on, this is just the way it is. Anything you could share to say, no, this is why we must address this and keep talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, boy, that's multifaceted. And thank you for your support and your advocacy, because I know that you're one of those individuals who has said, listen, I'm willing to be open to hearing this. Sometimes you just don't know what to do. And that's what I keep hearing when I talk to CEOs and C-suites and boards and companies in general. They do have good intent. Like they know that they need to do something, right? The business case is out there. We talked about this before, 30, 35 years in the making, the business case is there. And if any of your listeners need to kind of have one study to point to, there was an MIT study where they had all female teams, an all male team, and then a gender balanced team. The gender balanced team outperformed both the all male and the all female team with 41% higher revenues. So if there's one study that you think about when you think about diversity, think about that. And what I loved about that study is it said, you need balance. You need both males and females. There's a gender equity thing going on there. And if you let them bring both of their powers to the table, there's this incredible powerhouse within your organization that's unstoppable. So that's number one. If you don't buy into kind of this notion that it's good for business, go do the research. It's there, plenty of it. It's good for business. Number two, make yourself aware of what diversity really is. And, the beauty, as you said, is if you're in the financial services business, you buy into this concept called diversification, right? And it is perfectly aligned with what diversity actually is. I think diversity has been boiled down to either male, female, or ethnic diversity. And that's not really, that's a component part of it, but it's so much deeper of a concept than that. And if you think about diversity in your workplace with your people and align that to diversification of a portfolio, that's more in alignment of what diversity is all about. So if you create teams that are diverse and you go through the same process that you would in constructing a diversified portfolio, you're then creating a high performance team. Because what it's basically saying is you need different component parts of your portfolio to achieve your goal. People are the same exact asset as what you find in your investment portfolio. So that's kind of number one. Do your homework, do the business case, figure out exactly how you can achieve diversity within your organization through your people and the benefit of it. Number two, what's your biggest impediment? I think the biggest impediment today is not understanding that once you get a diversified team in your organization, how to create integration and how to accept that they're going to bring different perspectives, experiences, wisdom to the table. And that's what I say. In fact, I just tweeted out the other day, something, I'm paraphrasing myself here, but something to the effect of, we hire for diversity, and once they're in the organization, we expect conformity. So it's kind of like having a diversified portfolio. And let's say you want a balanced portfolio and you credibility weight one of your vehicles 90%. The other 10% can't work for you. So that's exactly what's happening in our organizations today. We need to make sure that we create a place where diversity can thrive and not conformity.
I think as businesses grow, you gain enough experience where you see when diversity works. Yeah. I know in our world, we see that you have to add younger people to your business because it's predominantly in the financial planning world, older people. And there's reasons for that, and I understand them. But younger people bring something to the table. I just finished listening to a book called Life Reimagined by Barbara Hegarty, one of the NPR people. Fantastic book. She talks a lot about how the brain works, looking at scans of brains. And when a young person is concentrating, one area of their brain that is really active, and then it may switch. So, for example, I'm looking at a webcam right now. That's part of my brain. I'm focused. But all of a sudden, I may then look at another monitor and I start thinking about something else. Older people, they don't have that type of focus. The older you get, the more parts of your brain are actually active. So you're thinking of many things at once. It's why you walk into the kitchen and stop and think, okay, why did I just walk into the kitchen? Because now there's 10 other things on your mind. Whereas my children go into the kitchen and all they think is carbs. So I get that, right? They're hyper-focused on one thing. Well, it allows you a certain level of insight when you're hyper-focused, and young people can do that. We already have plenty of evidence and proof that the diversity works. I guess it's going to whatever that next level is. I mean, how do we help somebody push beyond that and say, now you have to do something that might not make a lot of sense because you don't have experience, or it might be uncomfortable, but you have to get it involved. What's the first step, you think, to get them going?
We've had this conversation. I've had this conversation with a lot of C-suites on how do I encourage diversity with even the applicant pool, right? Because you can't hire based upon gender or ethnic background or sexual orientation, right? But yet we keep preaching that we want diversity within our workplaces. So step number one is make sure that you have a diversified portfolio of candidates before you even hire. I think that's step number one. Number two, you really have to figure out from a business perspective what type of individual you're looking for. See beyond the sex, see beyond the gender, see beyond all of that, and really figure out, do you want a high growth person? Do you want maybe someone who needs to generate ideas? You want to grow 25% in the next 5 years. Okay, well, you probably need to do things a little bit differently than you do right now. And so sometimes individuals, obviously without a lot of experience, are going to bring the best ideas. And I love this next generation, particularly for financial services. They are going to push us to become an industry that is going to set the bar for everyone else. They're technologically savvy, they're innovative, and guess what? They aren't going to take any flack within our organizations. They're going to ensure that we perform better as leaders. Love that about them. So number two, make sure that you have your candidate pool, make sure that you look beyond, that you truly understand what it is that you need from that individual. And then number 3, create an environment where those individuals can thrive. And in the book, I get really, really practical. Okay, let's just take an example here. Men speak for power, women speak for understanding. Men interrupt women 3 times the rate as they do other men. So again, you hire for diversity. Let's just say, for example, you bring a woman advisor in and you're talking about a potential challenge that you're having. And men will speak, again, 3 times as much as the woman, or they'll interrupt her. So you aren't getting the value of that diversity at the table. The good news is men will take more risk than the woman, but the woman will help you understand if you're going 150 miles an hour down the highway, where your potholes and your speed bumps are. So again, because she's more risk adverse, and again, the power of those 2 major components are going to make sure that you flawlessly execute. 92% of senior executives, 92% cannot be both strategic and flawlessly execute. So again, you want that diversity at the table, helping you to mitigate the risk that you have moving forward during execution. Most of them are strategic, most of them can execute.
Okay, hold on. I have to be the interrupting man here all of a sudden. 92% cracks me up. As soon as you said that, I thought 8% need to take another Colby. Because we got to find out if these quick starts actually score higher than 2 on anything else out there. So maybe those people exist. That would be fantastic. But 92%, that's probably a good number. If it was higher, I would not disagree or argue or even question it. But that's something that you certainly learn. There are generalizations between men and women, but there's also just blind spots. And that's, I remember taking a money personality test from Dr. Catherine Gurney 20 years ago. It was one of the first people in behavioral finance. And one of my biggest takeaways is entrepreneurs, it's not that they don't understand risk, they don't actually process it, meaning it's not real to them. You could lose everything in this. Okay, what's the point? Right? It just doesn't register. And how could you make strategic decisions with just brains like that in the room? You're going to crash and burn. So I think it's wonderful that you bring up, you have to have all those people there because it's 1 + 1 = 3, right?
Yes. It's exponential value. And, a lot of times men take issue if there is criticism, right, at the table. But women, again, are speaking to mitigate the risk. And so, again, that's where communication, you want to be open to different perspectives and not take it personally, because it's actually protecting you from the potential risk that you have during execution. So again, it is embracing different perspectives.
Anything I didn't ask that you want to add?
Yes, I do. So one question I would love to answer is, why is this important for the next generation? And I think for any of us that have children, nieces and nephews, grandchildren, this is really about the legacy that we're going to leave for them. Do we want our daughters to walk into a workplace where 75% of the time, at a minimum, they will be targeted, bullied, and abused? I mean, whether you're a mother or a father, aunt or uncle, grandparent, no one wants that to happen. So it's up to us to make that change happen. And particularly for those of us that sit in C-suites and boards, it's ours to own.
Excellent. Now here's the real final question.
Oh, I love it. The wand.
The magic wand comes out, the Disney wand. I know you probably have a few in your house as well. Or
we have one of those, yes.
So if you could wave the magic wand to change anything in the world that doesn't relate to COVID, what would you change, Berta?
I would make sure that the opportunities at the big table are the same for our sons as they are for our daughters. And that's when true success is going to happen, both in and outside the workplace.
Thank you so much for putting in all the time, the thought, the energy, and the investment in this book. It's powerful, it's necessary, it's timely, and I know it's going to impact the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ross, and thank you for being an advocate.
Thank you for listening to Outcomes. Subscribe now to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Advisor 2X. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service providers with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.